Hi, it's Summer, and today I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I'm currently getting over a cold, so I'm sorry if my voice sounds a little bit weird. I had to do this tag though because I've been having so much fun watching all of my friends do it, and also I've been doing this for almost every year since 2016. A few of those are private now because they're cringe, but the few that I do have still out, I will link in the description so you can watch them if you want to. I love doing this halfway check-in and just kind of like looking at my reading so far this year. So yeah, I'm just gonna get into it. Question number 1 is, what is the best book you've read so far this year? I've read so many good books so far this year, and I'm indecisive, so I'm just gonna tell you a few that have been my favorites. The first one that kind of comes to my mind is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This was 100% a cover buy because between how beautiful the cover is and just the title of the book, I just had a feeling that this was going to be so good. I went into it really hoping that it would live up to the cover, because a lot of the time the cover will be really pretty and then I don't end up loving the book itself. But luckily this one is just as beautiful inside as it is on the outside. This one is historical fiction fantasy with fae and fairies in it, and it also has a Grumpy Sunshine romance in it. It takes place kind of in like a small town, and I loved hearing about the town and about the people. I loved everybody's character development in this book. I loved the fantasy elements. I loved the relationship and the banter. And I also just really enjoyed the writing style too. This was an easy 5-star book, and I still think about it all the time. So far, like, I think maybe if I absolutely had to pick, I would maybe say this one is my favorite book so far of this year, but also I have so many other good ones. This one is so polarizing, and I know a lot of my friends do not agree with me on this, but I loved The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I've been trying to get through his entire backlist, and I actually successfully finished that this month. But I read this not too long ago and loved it. I was so worried, and I kind of tried to go into this with like no expectations because I knew that some people loved this and some people absolutely hated it. And I can totally see why it didn't work for a lot of people. I'm just already a fan of the type of things that were happening in this book. This one is about a woman who is grieving the loss of her husband. She also struggles with addiction, and she's living in her family's lake house. While she's staying there, she starts to kind of get to know the people that live in the house across the lake, and she kind of starts to spy on them a tiny bit, and she starts to think that there are some not so good things happening with them. This had so many twists and turns, and I was just invested from start to finish. I loved it. I feel like I can't tell you exactly the specific things that I loved about it without kind of spoiling it. So I loved this. It was 5 stars. I do not recommend the audiobook though, because I think the main character in this is like in her 30s, and the narrator for the audiobook sounded like she was like in her 60s, 70s, 80s or something. So it just wasn't working. But I definitely recommend reading this one with your eyeballs. And then my next favorite is House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. This is basically a lesbian vampire book, and it was so good. It was steamy and gothic, and just a really interesting concept to read about. The elite and rich people of this world employ young women to be blood maids for them because they believe that if they drink the blood of young women that they will, like, it will cure illnesses. They think that it'll like make you stay younger and healthier. So the main character that we're following is really poor, not doing well, and she's really desperate, and so she decides to apply to become a blood maid. So you're following her and the other blood maids that she lives with, and you just hear about her letting people drink her blood. So it's not real vampires, but it has vampire vibes, and it was just so good. And I do recommend the audiobook for that one. I literally have so many favorites. My last one that I'm going to talk about is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. It's not the best fantasy that I read by any means, but it was up there. Like, it kind of was giving me the same feelings as ACOTAR and From Blood and Ash. It's like the closest that I've felt to that in a long time. And I honestly was just really happy that the book lived up to the hype. It's high fantasy with dragons. I read this for my in-person book club, and basically everybody gave it like 10 out of 5 stars. It was really fun talking to my in-person friends at book club that read it and loved it, and a lot of them aren't fantasy readers, and so I think this book is really helping bring a lot of people into the genre. So I gave it 5 stars. I think that maybe if I was being like really nitpicky, I would give it maybe a 4 or a 4.5. But honestly, talking to my friends about this book just made me so excited about it, and I just had a really fun reading experience around it. So I feel like it's just 5 stars for me. Question number 2 is the best sequel that you've read so far this year. I don't think I've actually read very many sequels this year. The first one that kind of comes to my mind though is Lost in the Moment and Found by Shauna McGuire. This is the 8th book in the Wayward Children series. I haven't really loved the previous couple of books that she's put out that are in the series, and this one gave me the same feelings as reading the first few books in the series. I loved it so much, and it was really heavy and dealt with some heavy subject matter, but it was also beautiful. I always love their writing style. And this one was kind of slightly different than the other books. In the other books, you only really deal with like one door at a time. And in this story, you're seeing multiple doors and multiple worlds, because this is a portal fantasy series. And I just really loved this one. So definitely one of my favorite sequels that I read this year. Also, I just have to mention my reread of Heir of Fire, because I'm slowly getting through my reread of this series. It's the first time that I've reread it, so I'm having a ton of fun. And I actually liked Heir of Fire a lot more this time around than the first time. The first time around, like looking back on it, I feel like I was just kind of meh about it. But this one so far in my reread is my favorite. I'm kind of at the beginning of Queen of Shadows right now, and I remember loving Queen of Shadows, so I'm sure that will be a new favorite over this one. But right now, this is my favorite out of the series, and I wasn't really expecting that going into this, so I was kind of surprised and happy to love this one as much as I did. Question number 3 is, what are some new releases that you haven't read yet but want to? First, I have Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. This is the sequel to Ninth House, which I read last year and loved. I think it was last year. Maybe it was this year. I feel like I can't remember. The first book is really popular, so I'm sure that you've heard of it, but it's kind of like dark academia, fantasy, secret societies, all of my favorite things. I loved that one and immediately had to go buy the sequel when it came out, but I still haven't read it, and I need to. And this one is actually kind of a recent release, but it's Ascension by Nicholas Binge. I just barely bought this last week, but this is sci-fi about, I'm pretty sure there's a mountain that all of a sudden one day just grows out of the ocean. It just appears there. And so there's a group of scientists that are going to the mountain to go and explore it and kind of see what it's about. And I think that something starts to hunt them. So it's also like a thriller, and I am just really excited to get to this one. Question number 4 is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? So my most anticipated release was actually released yesterday, so I do have a physical copy. It's The Only One Left by Riley Sager. I cannot wait to read this one. I was thinking, because there's a house on the cover, that it would be a little bit like Just Like Home, but it sounds like it's a little different. It says it's a deliciously twisty and addictive gothic chiller about a young caregiver assigned to work for a woman accused of a Lizzie Borden-like massacre decades earlier. That sounds so good. I think a lot of people were super hyped for this too. I've seen all of my friends going out and buying this on its release day yesterday, so I know there's a lot of hype around it, and I feel like it might live up to the hype. I'm very excited. And then I'm also really looking forward to Iron Flame, which is the sequel to Fourth Wing. It's coming out in November. Question number 5 is, what is your biggest disappointment? I was really disappointed by Flower Heart. This was definitely an instance of the cover is beautiful, but the story just wasn't for me. I loved the premise of this one, that it was like flower magic, but I didn't like the writing style. It was so repetitive. The main character felt so juvenile, and also I just didn't like the plot. Like, I really just didn't like almost anything about this book. I think in my review for it, I said that the only character that I cared about was the main character's dad. And I had a lot of people agree with me, so I know that I'm not alone. Another disappointment was If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I buddy read this with my friend Jess, and we both had similar feelings. We just didn't enjoy it, and we both don't really know a ton about Shakespeare, and there's so much Shakespeare in this. So I would say if you like his works and you're familiar with it, you probably would get a lot more out of this. There's so much quoting Shakespeare and acting it out and like references to things that you kind of have to know the plot of multiple of his plays to really understand it, I think. I also was just really bored. Like, it was so slow paced. I didn't feel like anything was happening for this being kind of advertised as a thriller. So yeah, I just really didn't like this. So kind of sad about that. And then my last one, this makes me so sad because I was so excited to read it and give this author a try. It's The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I loved this cover too, and I had just heard nothing but good things about this author, but this book was so slow. The main character felt so juvenile, even though I'm pretty sure she was an adult, and I think this is advertised as an adult book. This is also advertised as horror, and it definitely was not scary at all. I was really hoping for more creepy sci-fi vibes because this is a retelling of The Island of Dr. Moreau. There are these creatures in the book called hybrids that her father is creating, and I was imagining like really creepy creatures, you know, and maybe that's where the horror came in. But the hybrids were literally like not scary at all. The whole entire time I was reading and they would be described, I was just imagining the minions that Maleficent has in Sleeping Beauty. Like, I just couldn't take it seriously. So I'm so sad that this was a disappointment. I was really hoping to love it. Number 6 is what was your biggest surprise? I have a few for this one too. My first one is A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher, because I don't love the cover. I definitely judge books based on their cover, but I heard that it was cozy fantasy and I've been wanting to try out some stuff from T. Kingfisher. So I kind of just went into it with like not a whole lot of expectations, but when I tell you I loved this book, I honestly should have included it in the first question with my other favorite books of the year because I loved it. I absolutely loved the writing style. It was so good. I cannot wait to read more from this author. It was so cozy. I loved the magic system. I'm pretty sure this would be considered middle grade. It's about this young girl who has magic, but in this world magic is not like really big magic. It's just kind of like small, almost useless magic. So her powers are that she can kind of like manipulate and control bread and bread dough, and she conveniently works in her aunt and uncle's bakery. She gets kind of wrapped up in this adventure and she makes a friend that is helping her. All of the characters are just so cute and quirky and unique and just lovable. And I loved how the main character, even though she feels like she's not strong, and even though her magic is small, she is smart and she comes up with creative solutions to her problems. I just loved it. And I really wasn't expecting, like picking up the book, I wasn't expecting to give it 5 stars, but I totally did. And I think about it all the time. I was definitely surprised by Fourth Wing how much I liked it, because I really wasn't expecting it to live up to the hype, but I'm so glad that it did, so that was a surprise. Also House of Hunger, I kind of just picked it up because I had heard some things about it, not a whole lot, and it became available on Libby for me to listen to. So I just kind of started reading it because it was available and it was convenient to listen to. So yeah, that's like my favorite thing, is when books surprise you, so loved that. Also, I feel like I was really surprised by my fairy reading vlog. That's the vlog where I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies and some other fairy books, and I got another 5-star out of that video. And I really didn't think that I'd get that lucky to have multiple 5 stars. I think I also read some like 5-star graphic novels in that video too, now that I'm thinking about it. And then directly after that video, the next book that I read was A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. So I was just so surprised by how much luck I was having at that time of the year with books and stuff. Sorry, Howell is yelling at me for attention. Question number 7 is a new favorite author. I feel like I can't say that they're like new favorite authors because I haven't read multiple books by them, but these are authors that I'm really excited to read more of their books. So T. Kingfisher, obviously, I've already talked about that a little bit. Also Jennifer McMahon. I read The Winter People back in like January for the New Year New Reads readathon that was hosted by my friend Gabby, and it was so good and creepy. I loved the writing, and I just cannot wait to read more like horror books from them. And then also Heather Fawcett, because I'm so excited to read more in the Emily Wilde series. Question number 8 is your newest fictional crush. Zayden Ryerson is definitely a new fictional crush. And then I also really like Delilah from Delilah Green Doesn't Care. She's like artsy and dark and moody, and she's just like cool. I like her. But I think those are kind of like my only like real crushes. I feel like as I'm getting older, I don't have like as many bookish crushes when I'm reading. Like, I don't want them for myself. Like, I love them for the characters, but I don't really care about like fangirling over them as much. Question number 9 is, who are some of your newest favorite characters? I said Crystal from Set on You by Amy Lee, because I just loved her and her personality, and just hearing about her being a plus-size fitness influencer. I just feel like there was so much great representation in that book, and I just love her because I can relate to her, so I really like her. I love Dora and Elias from Half a Soul. I love how they pretty much hate everybody else but like each other. It's kind of like a grumpy romance, and I just loved seeing them interact together. I also obviously loved Emily and Wendell from Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I love how different they are from each other, and hearing their banter and just seeing them together, so cute. And then I also said all of the characters from A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, because I just love everybody. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry. I actually cried during A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, which again, I was not expecting to have so many emotions while I was reading it, but it got me. It made me cry. Also Fourth Wing, I was sobbing. If you know, you know. Question number 11 is a book that made you happy. For this, I said Set on You, because again, it just made me so happy to like see somebody like me represented in a book. It was a fun, happy, cute rom-com. So I just remember feeling happy while I was reading it. Also In the Weeds, I really liked. It made me really happy to revisit this series again. Also the main love interest kind of reminded me of Travis a little bit, if I'm remembering right. So I don't know, it just made me happy. I just love Love Light Farms. And then also obviously like Emily Wilde and A Wizard's Guide. Definitely felt happy during all of those. Question number 12 is your most beautiful book that you've bought so far this year. Since I love beautiful covers so much, I have a few. Obviously first is Emily Wilde. I just love all the detail, and it definitely like fits the story so well. Like this is the perfect cover for this book. I also have these two really beautiful Wordsworth editions of some classics that some of my friends sent me. So this is The Secret Garden. Like look at the foiling, like it's so pretty. Like the spine is pretty. Even the back just is really pretty too. This one is Alice in Wonderland. Here's the back. I had to include my new edition of The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern because this is my favorite book. I saw this edition on Instagram somewhere and immediately had to have it. I think this is my favorite of all of the covers. So this is my third copy. Will I buy more if I want to? Yes. I also really like this cover. This is The Fairy Bargains of Prospect Hill by Rowena Miller. And then I have Vinegar Girl by Anne Tyler. Like, of course I love this. It's pink, has flowers on it. And then also The Sprite and the Gardener. I just think this is so cute and I love the illustration style. All right, and then the last question, question 13, is what books do you need to read by the end of the year? I would really like to read an Emily Henry book this year before the year's over. I haven't read anything from her yet, so I feel like I just want to form an opinion and read them because they're super popular, loved books. I also would like to read The Traitor Queen. It's the sequel in the Bridge Kingdom series, and I just kind of haven't read anything in that world like since last year, and I just want to keep continuing in the series before I forget too much about it. And then I also would like to finish my Throne of Glass reread before the year's over because I am dragging my feet. I need to pick it up. That was the mid-year book freakout tag though. I know this is like a tag, but I don't really know who's done this and who hasn't, so if you want to do this, I tag you. Even if you just want to let me know if you have your answers to these questions in the comments, I would love that too. For the secret emoji, I feel like there were a lot of flowers on some of my favorite book covers, so let's just do any of the flower emojis in the comments to let me know that you made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching though, and I will see you in the next one.